So what if there was a friendly way, to unite nearly all the countries across the world in a competitive way? Well, this is exactly what the Olympics are for. The Olympics allow for people to come together for a common purpose of competing in sports, many of which do not speak the same language and often come from different backgrounds. Now, these games are not only for the Olympians, though, they're for all of us. The fans around the globe are able to cheer on their favorite athletes and countries every time the games roll around. Now, growing up, I was raised to love sports, which is what the Olympic Games revolve around. This is why every time the games roll around, it's a joy for me and to many other people to root for the United States and for some of my favorite athletes. Now, my name is Alex Killinger, and I would like to introduce you on how the modern Olympic Games started, how the games are about more than just the sports, and just some of the major events that have occurred throughout the years. Now, to begin, most people are somewhat familiar with the games from about 3,000 years ago, but for the sake of the presentation, I'd like to focus more on the modern games. So these modern games first occurred in Athens in 1896. At the time, there were only around 60,000 spectators, 208 participants, which came from 13 nations. Now, the 43 events that were going on that year include track and field, gymnastics, swimming, wrestling, cycling, tennis, weightlifting, shooting, and fencing. Now, all of these, the games coming back, was all possible because of Baron Pierre de Coubertin of France, who wanted to promote physical education. So he wanted to bring the games back. Now, the Olympic symbol that many people know of the 5 rings was first publicly presented in 1913 on the center of a white background. Now, these rings represent the 5 continents that came together for the games. They first appeared in the games in the year 1920. The Olympics really came back to popularity in their 8th rendition of the games, which happened in Paris in 1924. At this rendition of the games, there were 3,000 athletes, over 100 of which were women, which was not common back then, and these athletes came from 44 different nations. This rendition of the games also had the first closing ceremony, and the debut of the Winter Olympics would happen later that year. So now that you know a little bit of the history, let's get to some of the goals of the games. So Olympism, which is, as defined by Olympic.org, is a philosophy of life exalting and combining in a balanced whole the qualities of body, will, and mind, blending sport with culture and education. Olympism seeks to create a way of life based on the joy of effort, the educational value of good example, social responsibility, and respect for universal fundamental ethical principles. So it's just a way of the Olympics promoting the good way of life, basically. The goal is to construct a peaceful and better world by helping the youth of the world learn by way of sport practice with Olympism and the main values. Now, the people in charge of promoting all of this and getting the games together are the International Olympic Committee, which is also called the IOC. Now, they're basically the people in charge, like I just said, and the roles of this organization include encouraging the ethics in the sports and encouraging youth to participate in sports, ensure the regular celebration of the games, which just means having them, act against the discrimination at any point during the games, promote women in the games, protect their clean athletes, and oppose any political abuse. Now, with all this being said, the games are not without their own controversial and big events. So the first one I want to talk about is when the first females started competing in the Olympics. This was in Paris in 1900. So prior to this, there were no female athletes, and the first games that they were permitted to participate in were lawn tennis and golf. And we've come a long way because just in 2012, women began competing in the boxing in London. Now the next event that I want to talk about happened with Jesse Owens in the Olympic Games in Berlin in 1936. So at the time, this is a time when the Nazi Party in Germany was starting to come to power. Hitler wanted to use the games as a way to prove Aryan superiority. Now, Jesse Owens was a track athlete, and he ended up winning several gold medals. He was an African American, so that kind of disproved Hitler's whole theory. And the very last event comes from Tommy Smith and John Carlos, Mexico City in 1968. So at this event, Smith and Carlos were known for protesting the U.S. treatment of black citizens at the time. And after the 200-meter race, the two men won first and third place. And at the awards ceremony, they played the national anthem, and the two men both raised a single black glove. They also got the second place Australian to wear a human rights badge while he was on the podium. Now, soon after, both Americans were banned from the Games by the previously mentioned IOC and the U.S. Olympic Committee. In the end, the Olympics are just a healthy way to bring together countries, compete, and promote athletes and such. Olympics have progressed from a much smaller event, as previously said, that grew into something much larger. They're very helpful in promoting healthy habits for young people and advertising for a better world. Let's not forget, though, the bumps in the path that got us to where we are today. The Olympics really are one of the only events that I can think of that bring together the whole world for a good purpose, good popular purpose. Now, thank you for listening, and I hope you're more informed about the Olympics now.